Hello everyone, my name is Hamid and today I'm going to show you how you can write a macro that is compatible with data with varying columns. This can be a very good portfolio project for people who are seeking job opportunities as a data analyst or data scientist. Basically what I'm going to show is how we can write a macro that can find a right cell to put a function on and also find a right range as an argument of the function. This was actually a project that I was given a couple of weeks ago, so I thought maybe this is a good project to share with you. In order to give you context about where such a macro can be useful, this is the actual project that I was given. The company that I'm working for has a software for customers and admin users. But obviously, they have different level of access to the data. Not only that, but also admins have different level of access based on the group that they're working. And for example, managers have different access to data than take writer. So basically, the company wants a list that mentions the name of all the admins and also the group that they are working for. And that's basically for auditing purposes when they want to make sure that everyone has the right access to the data. However, the software does not provide this list. The data that software can provide, and this is something that we couldn't change, was something like that. Basically, it lists all the groups and also the IP of the admins that are working on that group. For example, the first row of data shows that the admin with the IP of 15.75.2.47 is working as a developer. Also, they told me that each admin has a unique IP because basically they are using the same system every time. And also, each admin can only be working in one and unique group. So we expect each IP to appear just once in a dataset. However, I guess the challenge for this project was the number of columns, basically the number of groups, could be changed over time because the software is able to actually add or remove a specific group, and that means the macro should be able to work with different number of groups and with different names of columns. So that was actually one of the challenge of this macro. Also, this data set is not exactly what they want because it links IP to the group. But what we want was linking the groups to the admin names. So we needed another data that again was provided by the software, which basically links the IP to the name of the admins. And the whole context of the project was using these two data sets and a macro to obtain the list that we want. So that was the project. Before starting to write the macro from scratch, I want to show you the two Excel files that we have from the software. So this is the first Excel file that I mentioned. It basically links the IP of the admins to the group that they are working. We have like 800 admins, and that's why 800 rows of data. The other data set is what links IP to the name of the admin users. Again, that data set can also be varying in terms of columns because every time that a new admin is added, it will be appear as a new column. The macro should first read these two files and put it in a new workbook. And the reason is because we want to make sure that these two files, these two original files that we got from the software, remain intact. And the reason is because there might be some other macros that use the same data, and we don't want to interfere with those. Now we can start writing the macro from scratch. The first thing is just define it and give it a name. Name really doesn't matter. Here I just selected the name of the macro to be named. The first thing that I usually add as a first thing in my macro is to turn off all the notifications coming from Excel. And the reason is down in the road, we're gonna open and close some Excel files, and we don't want to be interrupted by Excel notification, something like, do you want to save data? Do you want to save the file before exit? Then we need to open a new workbook. And for that purpose, we need to first open a new variable and then set the new variable that we made to a new workbook. The next thing is to specify the location of the file that we need to open. And for that purpose, we need to define a new variable as a string. So by having the location of the file that we need, the next thing is to tell the macro, go to that directory and just open the file that is located there. So up to now, we expect the macro to open a new workbook and also open one of our Excel data sets. And we can test that by running the macro to here. Oh yeah, it doesn't need set here. Sorry. So if you run the macro, first is open a new workbook for us, and also open our group data set here. So far so good. The next thing is go to the workbook that we just imported and select all the data. So basically the macro should go to this imported workbook, go to that specific sheet, which is called groups, and select all the cells and then copy and paste it into the new workbook that we just made. And for that purpose, the first thing is to specify the sheet that all the data are located in. And then we should go and select all the cells. And for that purpose, we need to start from a very first cell, cell A1, and then sweep all the way down. So it basically selects all the cells that are located beneath A1. You can see that I used the function end here in order to make sure that all the cells, all the non-empty cells beneath cell A1 are selected. And so the next step is do the same thing, but instead of going down, we should go all the way to the right. So up to now, we expect the macro to select all the cells in the groups Excel file. And now what we want is, after selecting all of those, we need to copy them and paste them in the new workbook that we just made. So you can see I selected the new workbook. I went to the first sheet and I went to the very first cell and paste all the data. And I just pasted the value of the data because I didn't want the data to bring the format that they used to be in, because down in the road they're going to apply a new format and I don't want the previous format of the data to interrupt us. And after copying and pasting all the data, now we can just close the imported workbook. So we can now test the macro to see whether it's working properly. Oh, sorry, it's a typo here. Cool. So what we expect is now we want all the data in the group data set to be imported to a new workbook that we created. And yeah, cool. So this is actually all the data in our group data set. we can see that it's just the value of the data and not the format, and that was exactly what we wanted. So now we imported all the data from one of our Excel file to the new workbook. We need to do exactly the same thing for the other data set, the IP data set. And so we basically just copy and paste all the code that we have written and just made some slight change. So you can see that there are like two main differences here. The first one is I needed this line of code to add a new sheet to the new workbook. And that's because we wanted to import the new data into different sheet, not to overwrite with those that we have imported before. Another one is to transpose data before importing that. And the reason is because if you look at the data, you can see that names are located as a new column. However, for the sake of consistency, we want to have the name of admin people to appear as a new row versus a new column. So we wanted to transpose data after pasting. So now we can test the macro to see whether it's working properly. Yeah, that is actually a new sheet that was added to the new workbook. You can see that the data has been transposed, and now all the names are appear as a new row here. And we already had our first sheet, which is basically the data from our group data set. And that is end of importing all the data. So now we have all the data in just one new workbook. We can start doing some function on the data in order to convert this to the convert the data to the list that we want. So there are two things that we are curious about, and we hope to find these two by writing functions. The first one is to see which IP is represented by each row. And because we know that there is just, in each row, there is just one non-empty cell, we can simply use concatenate function to find the IP that is represented by each row. And we can just simply apply exactly the same function for all the cells. So this is the first thing that we want macro to do. However, because the number of columns can change over time, we cannot simply say the macro to go to cell K3 and write that function because this cell location might not be appropriate after deleting one group, for example. So we basically need to create a process to navigate the macro to the right cell. And for that purpose, we need to find specific cells as a guidance. So here I have flagged 3 cells to help me navigate the macro to the right cell to put the function. And these 3 cells are basically the corners of where the main data are located. And by main data, I mean where our IP data on which we're going to apply some functions are located. So the first cell is A3, which is basically the top left corner. The second cell is J3, we call it like northeast cell. Basically, this is like the top right corner. And similarly, we have our third cell. It's J802. I just call it southeast cell, but it's basically like bottom right corner. I guess we can explain it further in the code, but you don't have to define exactly these three cells. You can just define any cell as a guidance that works better for you. But I guess the important thing here is to flag some cells that help you navigate the macro to the right cell. That's actually the important idea that I wanna mention. So first we want to make sure that the right sheet is activated. And then we try to define these three important cells. So let me explain how I obtained the first cell. Basically, I tell the macro to go to the cell A2 and then just go one cell beneath, because I set the first value and offset 1 and the second one 0. Basically, that means remain on the same column, but just go one cell beneath. And let's see why I did that. This is the cell A2 where I started. It's gonna remain exactly the same no matter how many columns we have, because this is actually our first group, and we should still have like one group always, and that's why no matter how many columns, how many groups do we have, we should still have some value here, which is basically our first group. And then starting from A2, which is a solid foundation to start, then we can tell the macro to just go one cell beneath, and that's where our northwest cell is located. And similarly, we can define the northeast cell too. So again, that means we should start from range A2, go one cell beneath, and then go all the way to the right. And that basically would be starting from this and go all the way to the right, and you found this specific cell, which we call it northeast cell. Similarly, we can just start from here and say go all the way down to find our southeast cell, which is basically what we're gonna do now. And then by having all of these cells, now we can find the right cell to put that concatenate function in. So if we go back to the data, we can see all we need to do is find the northeast cell and then go one cell to the right to find the very first cell that we should put the function in. And we're going to do exactly the same thing on macro. So what it does is it starts from northeast cell, it's gonna go one cell to the right, and finally select that and put the function inside. And then if we go back here, here we wanna use a concatenate function, and we wanna start from our northwest cell all the way to northeast cell, and just concatenate all of them. So we're gonna do exactly the same. We're gonna start from northwest cell all the way to northeast cell and just put that as the argument of the function. So what I did here is basically just input the concatenate function starting from northwest cell, and here I needed to input the address function because if you look at here, you can see I input A3, which is the address of our northwest cell. So we need to have address here. Here I just apply false for the address because we want address to be relative and not absolute. And then a colon symbol because again, here we have a colon between the addresses of the cells. And finally the address of northeast cell here. So that would put a function that we want in the right cell, but at the same time we also want to make sure that it's gonna autofill, it's gonna like apply the same function to all the cells beneath, and for that purpose we need to write this code. So what it does is, starting from the cell that we put the function in, it's gonna go all the way down to southeast cell, but not exactly that cell, one cell to the right. So we're gonna start from the cell that we put the function in and apply the same function all the way down to the cell that is located one cell to the right of southeast cell. And so basically what it's trying to do is apply the same function for all of these cells. Again, here I want to just mention that you don't have to use exactly the same cells. These are the cells that I found easier for me to navigate the macro. Whatever cell that works maybe better for you, you can just go with that. But again, the idea is just to flag some cells to help you navigate the macro to the right cells. That's the whole idea. So now we can try whether the macro is working properly. Yeah, it's always need to be something, I guess. Oh yeah. So first, this needs to be new workbook, and then we have a typo here too. Shits. Cool. Hopefully, good. It's now running, and if you see the result, cool. We can see that it basically just concatenate all the cells, and it does a good job all the way down here. Nice. So that was the first thing that we want to do. The first one is which group is actually represented in each row. So basically, we want to see which group is linked to the IP that we just found here. For that purpose, I'm going to use this function. Please let me know if that's not very clear, so I can actually just explain it more in the comment. So basically what it does, it goes through all the blue cells here and just find the one that is non-empty. And then after that, it just report the corresponding cell in the same column, but in row number 2. And it always needs to be remain at row number 2, and that's why I used a dollar sign before 2 here. And that kind of makes sure that when we apply the same function to all the cells beneath, what it reports, it always the group names in row number 2. I hope it's clear enough. If it's not, please just let me know in the column. I would be more than happy to just explain it further. And now if we just apply the same thing again, it's going to report the group that the IP that we found is located for. So here we're going to use the same process as before. For first navigating the macro to the right cell, and second to just give the right argument to the function. So what it does for like first finding the right cell to put the function, it goes to north cell east and then move to the right 2 cells to find the right cell for putting the first function. So it seems a little bit complicated, so let me go through that in more details. The first part, the X lookup true, is basically what we have here too. So that's the first part. And then we need to give the address from A3, which is the address of northwest cell, to J3, which is the address of northeast cell, followed by this symbol, which basically says it shouldn't be null. And that is what we trying to do here. So we started from like northwest cell address, again false, false, because it needs to be relative address, colon symbol, and then go to northeast cell address, again false, false. It shouldn't be equal to like empty. So that's where these symbols are coming from. And after that, we have A2 to G2 here, and how we navigate the macro through that is from northwest cell, we should go one cell to the top and go all the way to the right to the cell that is just one cell above northeast cell. And that's how I did it in the macro. So basically, you start from northwest cell, and the offset, that means just go one cell above and do exactly the same thing for northeast cell, just go one cell above. I played with true and false here to just make sure that it always remains, the output of the function always remains at row number 2. So the column can change from A2 to J, but the row should always remain at 2. So again, if you need more explanation on that, please let me know in the comment. This is basically a kind of advanced, difficult macro. So yeah, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comment. I promise to actually go through all the comments and answer those. Cool, and the last thing that we need to do is basically just apply the same function to all the cells again as before. So it's basically like before, but instead of offsetting just 1 to the right, here we just offset it 2 to the right. And the reason is we want the same function to be applied all the way down here to this cell, which is 2 cells to the right from southeast cell. And now we can try the macro, just run it. Hopefully it works. No. Oh yeah, there is an extra space here. There shouldn't be any space between argument and function. Hopefully now now I see. And if we check the file, we can see that it's actually working properly. We have the IP and the group name that is represented by each row here, and they are all the way down here. Cool. So that is exactly the information that we want for that sheet. So that's good. And I guess the last thing that remains to be done is try to link the name of the admin to the group that they are working by using the IP. So we're going to use the IP here and here to link the name of the admin to the group that they are working for. And for that purpose, we can just use the XLOOKUP function. So what this function does is try to find this IP into this list where we listed all the IP, and when there was a match, it basically just report the group of the admin. And then we should actually apply the same thing to all the cells, and then finally just put that last piece of function to the macro. So the first thing is trying to select the right sheet. The function should be on the second sheet. And we're gonna just follow similar steps as before to write the function into the macro. So basically what it does, it starts from cell C2, which would be still in the case no matter how many columns of group do we have. And then it starts from the northeast cell, go one cell to the right, and then it finds the address, the absolute address. Here we added a new piece of information to the address argument, and that is because we want to mention the sheet that the information is stored into the argument. Because we are writing a function in sheet number 2, but we are using some information from sheet number 1. So we want to make sure that this is mentioned in the argument of the function, so the function should go to sheet number 1 and just find the information there. The rest is basically the same as before. We start from northeast cell, one cell to the right, to southeast cell, one cell to the right. We basically just start from here and we went all the way down to here because it's actually just one cell to the right of the southeast cell. And then for retaining the value, we started from northeast cell, but 2 cells to the right in order to find this cell, and basically do the same by going all the way down, or just go 2 cells to the right from southeast cell. And then after writing that function in the macro, now we need to apply exactly the same thing to all the cells beneath. And now we can test whether the macro is working properly by testing that. It's gonna take for a while, and now we can check the result. And it seems it's working properly. This is actually exactly the list that we want. It links the name of the admin to the group that they are working for. It basically does that for all of our admin users. This is exactly the list that we wanted from the beginning. So you can just leave the macro as it is. Currently, it's working exactly as it's expected. But here I just added some other code to the macro to just make it more beautiful. You don't have to include those two, but you can just check the final macro. It's attached in the description. I just want to show you how the final macro would work after adding those parts. It's basically the same as what we had before, but just add some colors to make it more beautiful and easily interpreted. Okay, I wish you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if you have any question in the comment. Again, I would promise to actually answer all the questions in the comment. I'm also like thinking about the other project to make a video from. So if you have any idea about the project that you are eager to find, please let me know. I would be more than happy to actually make a video out of that.